Well, to spend or to save, is the radish the answer? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, do we need a supplemental savings plan through our place of employment? As always, remember, if you have a question for me, go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com, and we'll get that taken care of for you. That's all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. While you're there, make sure you sign up for the Prudent Money e-letter, and we send that out to let you know what's being updated and put on the site. We do take the program and form it into a podcast, and we do that every day, Monday through Friday. So you can always sign up and get notified when that hits the account. And you can always get it on any platform that you like to go to listen to your favorite podcast. And we hope that Prudent Money becomes one of your favorite podcasts. And as always, if you'll like the where it says to like the podcast, we certainly would appreciate it. That's all at wherever, like I said, whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts. Let's talk a little bit about Ted Benna. He is the reason why we have the 401k plan, and is often called the father of the 401k plan. He rolled out, he put this plan together and rolled it out to some of the companies he works with. And the first 401k plan was in 1979. Of course, we know the rest of the story, and it just blew up. And what's interesting, too, there's a couple of things to go along with that. First of all, we turned into a culture of saving for retirement back in 1979. That was the real start of things. Before that, you never really had to worry about saving money for retirement, because your company was paying such a great pension benefit that, when you retired, and back then, everybody stayed with their companies for decades, and you didn't have as much moving around as you do today. But they stayed there because they were incentivized to stay and take advantage of the pension benefits. So if you could retire and make up to 75% of whatever you were making at your old place of employment, then you've got and plus throw Social Security in there, you've got a pretty good setup for retirement. Well, of course, as we know, companies have gotten so far away from the pension benefit, they don't want the liability, they don't want anything to do with it now, and so you've seen the shift, really, which started slowly happening in 1970. 1979 was the starting place for that, and of course built over time. And now you have trillions and trillions of dollars running through those 401k plans. It's really amazing. Well, this article, though, is he has come out with a supplemental savings program called the Radish. Now, nowhere can I find out I figure out why he called this plan the Radish. It makes no sense. I can't make it stand for anything. It's just the Radish. And he says that right now we're in a period where the 401k plan was really designed for the middle and low income employees, and the problem is they're not saving, because it's just not in the budget or the spending plan. Today, looking at your middle class and lower income class, you're seeing more and more people struggling to make ends meet. It's really the untold story of America right now. All you see is the quote unquote talk of prosperity. You see the rich getting richer, and then there's the rest of everybody else. So this is one of the things, and I'll talk a little bit about the downside to it. This is what Ted Benna was wanting to target towards, is this middle to low income employment class. And he said in the current economy, he noted that more money, than ever is needed to go towards essentials like food, education, healthcare, and of course, homes. The problem with that is, and we'll talk a little bit about this towards the end, the problem that you run into is that the essentials or the emergency fund aspect of your budget is about the food, is about the healthcare, which are probably the two largest categories of expenses right now if you look at everybody and everything that people spend money on. Healthcare is way out of control. You got food who's getting hit hard by inflation. Homes shouldn't even be in that definition. I'll talk more a little bit about that in a second. But this plan would function, and I love this, I actually love this idea. The plan would function as an employer-funded incentive program that lets companies deposit money into an account for workers who hit their performance goals on a yearly, monthly, or even weekly basis. It's not a replacement for the 401k plan, but rather a supplement which would benefit both employer and employee. The idea presents a fascinating dichotomy, especially for prospective home buyers attempting to balance saving for retirement and saving for a down payment. And actually, therein lies the problem, is that you have the balance between saving for the long term and saving for, for something like a down payment of a home. This is the fundamental problem. We've gotten out of balance what we need, what we want, and securing a retirement, 20, 30 years down the road. And there are three totally different things. And I think therein lies the problem. Benna concedes that retirement accounts have turned a lot of spenders into savers. That I would agree, and that's been a great thing about it. But these days, he believes 401k plans more greatly benefit higher paid professionals than workers with the greatest need to save. And this is the other thing too. It's how they communicate the benefits from these plans. I think it sends the wrong message when you make it look as if the whole idea of putting money in a 401k plan is about savings, about saving more. Saving is just one aspect of it. It needs to be about saving and investing. And I think we put all the focus and all the effort in on saving, which is a very important part of the entire program. And we forget about putting emphasis on investments and making the investment aspect of the 401k plan work towards your benefit. Very basically, Radish functions as a tax-advantaged 401 similar to a profit-sharing plan. Benna goes on to say employees will receive contributions without having to have money deducted out of their paycheck. And for employers, because contributions function as deposits into a qualified retirement plan, they avoid payroll drags like FICA, unemployment, and workers' compensation. The interesting thing about that is where do the politicians fall in on this idea, and would they actually allow that to happen? You know, you've got a Social Security system that's in peril right now, and you got nothing being done about it, which always amazes me. I guess the red flags don't go up and the emergency sounds don't get broadcasted until you get at least about a year away from the thing, the benefit falling apart. So I certainly hope that we can get something done before the proposed day that Social Security, or proposed year that the Social Security goes bankrupt, which I believe, as of the latest, it is 2032, I believe. So he goes on to say, rather than focusing on 20 or 30 years to build for your retirement, I want it to be more of an emergency fund, emergency savings type thing where they could dip into it and access it when they had shorter term financial needs. I go back to the issue of needs, priorities, wants, and specifically for the long term. A need is not something that we should have a plan like this set up for. I like the idea, especially like that it's tied to performance goals. I think that makes everybody more profitable. At the same time, you know, most people don't have an emergency fund set up. That's a basic priority that we get, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. But it's what's being communicated to the workers so very, very important, and just being able to separate long term and short term is extremely important to the conversation. Pulling money from a 401k has long been considered a financially risky move. Absolutely, it's a financially risky move. And can you imagine from day one if the government would have said there's no way to get to this money except maybe for a disability or a extreme healthcare situation? I mean, not for, you know, a $10,000 down payment on a house, not for, yeah, you can get to the money, but we're going to penalize you. If someone has to get to their money and it gets penalized, at the end of the day, they don't care. They want to get whatever they can get out of the plan. So why not just say you can't just treat the 401k plan like a ATM machine, I guess is the best way to put it. And there's just so many miscommunications that are occurring. It's no wonder why the average investor or average saver for retirement, investor for retirement is very confused. We'll talk a little bit more about this here in a second. We are up against a break. This is Bob Brooks. Stick around. We'll be right back. Hello, this is Bob Brooks. Proverbs 22:3 and Proverbs 27:12 are the exact same verse word for word. I call them the stewardship verses of risk. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we teach about risk, how to identify it, how to figure it out, and what to do about it. We believe that to be a prudent steward, you have to be a good risk manager. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, home of the modern-day steward movement.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
This is Rob Randall, your host and teacher of the Invisible War radio program. The Invisible War is the study of God's Word on how to walk in Christ's victory in the spiritual battles we face against the powers of darkness. Join me every Sunday morning at 9 right here on KDKR and KYJC in Commerce, your station for life.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. If you got a question for me, go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com, and send it in. It does not go into a little black hole. It actually does get answered, and I would love to hear what's going on with your situation, and it's always a great place to go to get information. That's all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. We're talking about this supplemental plan called the Radish, and it is designed, well, it's a little bit of it's confusion as to what it's really designed for. What originally they say in the article is that Ted Benna, the creator of the 401k plan back in the 70s, what they say is that it's there designed for emergency needs. And then in the same breath, he says, and you can use it for a down payment for a house. It comes down to mixed messages, what the real intent and the priority here that we're trying to accomplish. We'll talk a little bit about that. But, once again, this is set up to where the employee is issued some performance goals. They hit those performance goals. They get a contribution put into their Radish account, and you can accumulate that money for short-term needs. And that's what it's really intended for. And I think you would agree that if you looked at what constitutes short-term needs, is maybe not a down payment on a house. So let's take a look at this and kind of do the pros and cons. Number one, love the idea of it being incentive and performance based. I think that there's your socialist Democrats in Congress want to just give money out, give it away, and has nothing to do with working and earning that money. They just want to give it away. I've never agreed with that. I think it comes down to something being incentive. I love that it's being incentive and performance based, because once again that benefits everybody. It is a supplemental account to the 401k plan, and I think it comes down to questions regarding the employer. You're already taking the employer and putting them into a tough spot by them having to give more money, pretty much in the same way, increase payroll, but they're not paying all the payroll taxes. It comes down to, will the politicians actually agree to something like that? And I'll also say this: why are we talking about a concept that's nowhere even near being implemented? I like to bring these ideas to you when I come across them, because a guy like Ted Benna back in the 70s never thought his 401k idea would take fire and do what it's done. Probably the same thing with the Radish. So rather than focusing on 20 to 30 years to build for your retirement, he wants it to be more of an emergency savings account where they could dip into it and access it when they had shorter term financial needs. All that says to me is his intent for this, and it is kind of a contradiction with the other things he brings in, but I think I can resolve that contradiction. If I were to communicate this, I would say this plan is set up to assist you in building an emergency account. Once you have that emergency account built and funded, then you, on top of that, the money that you save and grow, you can take that money and you can use it for a down payment. But I think that the whole point is, or it should be, is that this is all about accomplishing a priority, which is to set up an emergency goal, which I think is the biggest problem. He makes the comment, and I'll read it to you real quick. He says, in the current economy, he noted that more money than ever is needed to go toward essentials like food, education, healthcare, and of course, homes. This is where it gets a little bit mixed up, if you ask me, because there's a big difference between putting food on the table for your family versus being able to put money towards a down payment on a home. And I just think that it's a miscommunication. It sends missed messages. Once again, I think the important message is build the priority, which is the emergency fund, then worry about the down payment or whatever else. Make sure that you keep it in order. The next thing that jumped off the page is we talked about this. It comes down to short-term versus long-term. And I talk a little bit about this, or I've talked a little bit about this in the past, is that I personally believe that, of course, minus the match that an employer will give you in free money for contributing to a 401k plan, I say stop there. If you are just starting out and you don't have an emergency fund, yes, absolutely, take advantage of the match. I mean, free money is free money, and you want to get that by contributing to the 401k plan, but everything else, that's where you stop. Everything else should go for the short term and build an emergency fund. Now, current pop culture finance would say absolutely that's wrong advice. You've got to max out to save for your retirement. If people could look at it from the standpoint of why would you want to put money, tell me where it makes sense to contribute 100% of your savings of your spending plan towards the 401k plan without an emergency fund being set up. It makes no sense at all. That's why I strongly urge people to take that money and put it towards the emergency account until you have it built up. Then at the point that you have it built up and maintained, then start maxing out your 401k plan. To me, that makes the most sense and the best way to go about it. The only exception is why you'd want to do both is if you were taking advantage of a 401k match. And I think that's very, very important. But, I think the confusion starts with, you're going to be shocked when I say this, the politicians, when they put these multi-use platforms, end up, like the 401k plan. Well, you can take money out without penalties if you put $10,000 of it towards a first-time house. You can take money out for this. You can take money out for that. And it's designed to where you can access your retirement money for various reasons. And I through 34 years of being an advisor, I've seen people take money out for all kinds of reasons. It's not my place to judge whether that's good or bad, right or wrong. It's just that what if your 401k was greatly limited to what you could take out for true emergency situations, like a disability or something, or a natural disaster that occurred, or something to that extent, versus money to fund an entire down payment. Because like I said earlier, you can penalize people all you want to by hitting them with a 10% penalty, making them pay taxes on that money that they take it out of 401k plan. They're taking it out for a reason, and they're going to get whatever they can get, and most people don't even think twice about getting hit with a 10% penalty. But what if you said you can't take it out for any other reason? We would start building greater security towards the future and wouldn't be looking at the future with the concern of a retirement crisis facing this country. And if you look at the statistics, you see it in a very, very big way. Remember, an emergency fund is critical. You want to build that, and you want to have it to where you can maintain it. And there's no magic about it. It's just pure savings. I prefer that people not take that money and invest it. I think you got to keep it in the most riskless type of an account, which in my opinion is a money market, because it pays more than a savings account. But you can be the judge of that. The bottom line is the habit of saving and accumulating money for emergencies only, then look at the long term. I think personally you'll be so much better off. And the good thing about whether you're investing for the long term or the short term is that you're developing key habits at a time in your life where you're making probably more than you've ever made. You have a lot of responsibility, and you're trying to make good choices when you've got the emotions of money and wants and desires and priorities and values all crowding up into your life. And you've got to pick and choose what makes the most sense. Going back to habits, I think habits is such an important thing to think about and consider. The one thing that separates those who have been successful with money versus those who have struggled with money is simply habits. The people who have been successful, it really comes down to this. They have better habits than those who are not successful. You want to change your financial situation, you want to change your life, change your habits. And that's, of course, over a broad spectrum of situations, scenarios that you can look at. But it's just so very important to have the right habits in place, practicing them, and maybe get a Radish funded Radish is what Ted Benna called this supplemental plan. I got to thinking about this. Ted Benna would be a fascinating person to have on the program and talk about how the 401k became invented and all the stories behind that. And then also ask him, why in the world did you name the supplemental plan you'd like to see America adopt Radish? Well, maybe we'll see. Hey, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. If you've got a question for me, please go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.